Hi, I'm Funk, and this is podcast number 31. Now, I'm pushing this book called Loretta and Me, starting Loretta Young and me, because much of the material I'm using at this stage of my podcast come from this book, but there's a lot of material in it that I don't have the chance to discuss, and that I think you'd find quite interesting. And also, when you're on Amazon looking for this, check out one of my five fiction, very spellbinding fiction books and see which ones you'd like. Okay, here we go. Very early after I met Loretta, she asked me if I'd help her fill out the 1990 census form. I said, sure. I'll ask you the questions, you answer them, and then I'll write them in. But when the question arose, how many children have you given birth to? Loretta shouted, that's none of their damn business, and brought work on the census to an end. I was pretty sure I knew what was behind this explosion. Even in Kentland, Indiana, where I grew up, I was aware of the rumors that Loretta Young had given birth to a secret baby fathered by Clark Gable, and then raised that child as her adopted daughter. I didn't know how I was going to approach this topic, but as it turned out, Loretta brought it up herself. We'd already discussed, no, we'd spent a day discussing various anecdotes related to the Washington State location shooting of the 1935 movie Call of the Wild, a film in which she co-starred with Gable. We were about to end the second day's discussions when Loretta sprang up and with her normally controlled voice rising said, you haven't asked me anything about Clark Gable and Judy. I can still see her pacing that long living room. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater with matching wool slacks. She was like a caged animal, a cage constructed by 55 years of refusing to directly acknowledge the matter, or, for that matter, face her inherent feelings. In our discussion earlier that day and the previous day, she described the flirtatious relationship between her 22-year-old self and the 34-year-old married Gable. She and her chaperone, this young woman named Frances Early, shared a room while they were on location. But on the train returning to Los Angeles, Loretta occupied her own compartment, and that's when Gable arrived uninvited. Using Loretta's word, he became very, very persistent. And that evening on the train, they had their sole sexual encounter. Several years later, Loretta discovered another term to describe that encounter, date rape. But discussing that now would be getting way ahead of the story. Now, it was really bizarre how Loretta learned that she might be pregnant. In fact, Gable came up with the question himself. They were back on the 20th century backlot, filming a scene where Loretta, her character was in a stream of water. And somebody asked her if she was on her period, and she said no, yet she was late. When Gable heard this, he waited for a chance to talk to Loretta directly, and he asked her, do you think you might be pregnant? She said, no, I don't think so. I'm often right. But that got her thinking, and eventually she went to her family doctor, and he confirmed the pregnancy. Now, I'm going to pause here and reveal just how unobjective of a writer I was. I was convinced Loretta was Judy's birth mother, even before I ever met Loretta. But after knowing her for several months and realizing the pain Loretta was carrying regarding this facet of her life, I had hoped it wasn't true, even though I was sure that it was. I hated to think how much she had suffered over the years. Now, let's go back to the day of Loretta's initial revelation to me. She continued pacing the room, and her composure was uncharacteristically ruffled and her speech pressured. There was a silent pause as she walked towards the end of the room, and then she said, "I'm sorry, but I had to think of myself first. You can't put any of this in the book." I said I understood, even though I didn't. What did she mean, thinking of myself first? I was glad that evening shadows were filling the room, because that provided me cover to gather my things and leave. All the way home and into the evening, I repeatedly thought about, "I'm sorry, but I have to think about myself first." What did she mean? Then I recalled earlier when Loretta discussed one of the consequences of her impulsive decision to marry actor Grant Withers 2 weeks before her 17th, no, 2 weeks after her 17th birthday. Grant had married previously and divorced, so marrying him in the Catholic Church was not an option. Now, Father Ward was a young priest that Gladys, Loretta's mother, engineered into her actress daughters' lives by having them come to dinner every Thursday night. Now, after her elopement to Grant, Father said the following to Loretta: "You cannot be a movie star and go around believing as if you're Jane Doe and have nobody paying any attention to you. Everything you do is going to be noticed, it's going to be judged. So better a stone be tied around your neck and drop to the bottom of the ocean." Hold on. "Than if you give a bad example. And you have already done it to two girls I know. Two 16-year-old Catholic girls have been married out of the church. You know what each one said to me? 'Well, Loretta Young's Catholic, and if she can do it, so can I.' Those sins are on your soul. So decide now whether you want to be an actress and behave yourself. It can be done. Other people have done it." Now, by this time, I knew Loretta well enough to realize that she had held on to her pre-Vatican II Catholicism, which was much stricter than post-Vatican II. Now, I recall growing up Catholic in the 50s. Sex was never discussed, but somehow you knew that if you engaged in premarital sexual relations, it ranks just slightly below murder. Now, I'm kidding, of course, but really not entirely. So I don't think Loretta ever recovered from her guilt of having a baby outside wedlock. The sexual revolution of the 60s was well entrenched by the time I met her, but it had not altered her thinking. The oft-stated quote, "The truth will set you free," did not resonate with her. Rather, her position seemed to be, "Never acknowledged, never happened." Now, this solid wall of silence theory of Loretta's would be confirmed to me in the months ahead by a variety of sources. Loretta herself told me that she'd never discussed it with Tom Lewis in the 16 years they lived as husband and wife. Josie Wayne, John Wayne's first wife, um, and Loretta's best friend, and we've met Josie in previous podcasts. She told me that the subject was never broached between the two of them, that she had noticed the truth of the matter before Judy was born. Polly Ann, Loretta's older sister, told me that the topic had not been discussed among the three older sisters since Judy's wedding over 30 years earlier. At that time, it was their mother Gladys' opinion that Judy should know the truth of the matter. And Polly Ann and Sally, the older sisters, concurred with their mother. But Loretta issued a strong veto. And Loretta told me that even though her half-sister, Diana, who at age 12 and was living in the same house, had been totally unaware of Loretta's pregnancy, Georgiana told me that she had known all along that throughout their entire lives, the subject had never been discussed. To me, all these were examples of Loretta's theory. If something is not discussed, it just didn't happen. Now back to June 1990, when Loretta discussed with me the Judy Clark Gable saga for the first time. I wrote her a letter a few days later suggesting a way we could acknowledge the Judy Clark Gable situation, but without exploiting it. She responded with a letter. It was written on June 15, 1990. Dearest Ed, I loved your letter of June 11th. I feel gratitude to God for your answer regarding me. But I find I cannot put in writing for strangers, especially publishers, to read. Don't ask me why. I don't know, and I don't remember words. I just remember my feelings of gratitude and pride in you, my friend, not the author of a book on me. I'm sorry if this doesn't make sense. It's the best I can do. I pray you'll understand. Love you always, Loretta. Now, over time, I slowly learned of Loretta's limited engagement with Gable after she knew she was pregnant, as well as how she managed to have a secret baby. There was a lot of finagling to pull all that off. Again, those stories will follow in detail when I do multiple podcasts about Loretta's life as she revealed it in the book Behind the Door, The Real Story of Loretta Young. Do I have that here? No. But that's my biography of her. For now, we'll follow the narrative of what it was like for me to walk into her life, my relationships with her, her family, and her friends. But believe me, there's a ton more to tell. Now, the next podcast, I'm traveling to Montecito to meet and interview Robert Mitchum, who co-starred in the movie Rachel and the Stranger. Now, he said to me, I said something about he really could play a really evil guy. And he said, I made over 200 movies and I only made 2 of those. Now, one of them was called Cape May, and he really was evil in it. Gosh, the second one, sorry, I can't think of it. But all you have to do to go online is just put his name and Shelley Winters, and that movie will come up, and he's terrifying. So anyway, I'll know more about it when I talk about him on our next podcast. Hope you're having a good day. Bye bye.